Welcome to Sinister States.
I didn't plan to become a highway toll collector. Most people assume it's one of those jobs someone falls into after running out of better options, and they're not entirely wrong. 2 years ago, I was working nights at a distribution warehouse outside Dayton, stacking boxes onto conveyor belts while fluorescent lights hummed overhead like angry insects. It paid enough to keep the rent covered, but not enough to feel like life was moving anywhere. Then the warehouse shut down. Corporate restructuring, they said. Suddenly, half the night shift was unemployed, including me. A friend of mine mentioned the toll road authority was hiring. The position sounded simple enough. Sit in a booth, collect fees, keep traffic moving. Decent hourly pay, quiet night shifts, and benefits if you stayed long enough. I figured it would be temporary. That was before I started working Exit 17. Exit 17 sits along a long stretch of highway that cuts through farmland and forest about 40 miles from the nearest real city. During the day, the road carries commuters, delivery trucks, and vacation traffic heading north toward the lake. At night, it's mostly empty. The toll plaza itself has 6 lanes, though only 3 are ever open after midnight. Fluorescent lights hang over each booth, casting pale circles onto the asphalt. Beyond the lights, the highway dissolves into darkness so thick it feels like the road just stops existing. When you work nights, you learn how different the world feels after 2 in the morning. The air gets heavier, sounds carry farther, and sometimes drivers roll up to your booth who look like they've been on the road far longer than any normal trip should take. My supervisor, Carl Donnelly, handed me the rule sheet on my first night. Carl was in his late 50s, tall and narrow-shouldered with a permanent squint like he didn't quite trust the lighting anywhere. He'd worked the toll authority long enough that he seemed almost welded to the place. "Night shift's quiet," he told me as he unlocked my booth. Inside, the booth smelled like old coffee and machine oil. There was barely enough room for a chair, a small cash drawer, and a window that slid open toward incoming traffic. Carl placed a laminated sheet on the counter. "Memorize these," he said. I glanced down. 7 rules were printed in thick black lettering. At first, I thought it was just standard operating procedure. By the end of my first week, I realized it wasn't. Rule 1. If a vehicle stops before the white line, do not signal them forward. Most drivers roll right up to the booth, stopping just short of the window so they can hand over cash or tap their pass card. The white line painted across the asphalt marks where they're supposed to stop. But occasionally, a vehicle will stop several yards short. When that happens, the instinct is to wave them forward. Rule 1 says not to. Carl explained it in a flat tone. If they stop early, leave them there. Don't wave, don't speak, don't step out of the booth. "What if they're confused?" I asked. Carl didn't smile. "They're not."
Rule 2. If a driver refuses to show their face, do not ask questions. That one sounded strange until I realized how many drivers keep their interiors dark at night. Some wear hats pulled low, some sit back in shadows so you can barely make out their eyes. But the rule wasn't about dim lighting. It specifically said if the driver keeps their face hidden, I was to take the payment and let them pass, no questions. Rule 3. If a vehicle arrives with no headlights, close your window and wait. Headlights are mandatory on the highway at night. Most drivers know that. But Carl told me sometimes a car will roll through the darkness with its lights completely off. If that happens, he said, you shut the window and stay quiet. What about the toll? They won't stop long. Rule 5. Never accept coins that feel warm. I remember laughing when I read that one. Carl didn't. Bills only, he said. If they offer coins and they're warm, decline them. Why? Because you don't want them. That was all the explanation he gave. Rule 6. If the radio goes silent between 3:13 and 3:17 a.m., do not look down the highway. I thought that one was a joke. Carl's expression suggested otherwise. Rule 7 was printed in bold at the bottom. If you see headlights approaching but no vehicle arrives, lock the booth and call me immediately. Carl tapped the laminated page once. Most nights, none of this matters, he said. but sometimes it does. He left me alone in the booth after that. The first few nights were normal, boring even. Pickup trucks rolled through around midnight, farmers heading home from late shifts. Long-haul truckers passed by every hour or so, engines rumbling like distant thunder. Around 2 in the morning, traffic usually died completely. That was when the highway felt different. The fluorescent lights above the plaza buzzed constantly, and insects swarmed around them in slow spirals. Beyond the booths, the empty roads stretched out like a black ribbon, disappearing into farmland. Sometimes I would stare down that dark stretch and feel like something out there was staring back. Nothing unusual happened until my 6th night on shift. It was around 2:40 a.m. The road had been empty for nearly 20 minutes when I saw headlights approaching in the distance. They moved slowly, too slowly for the highway. As the car rolled closer, I noticed something odd about the way it moved. It drifted slightly left and right within the lane, not like a drunk driver, but like someone unfamiliar with how steering worked. The car stopped 10 feet before the white line.
I felt the laminated sheet sitting beside the register. For a moment, I considered waving them forward, but Carl's voice echoed in my head. Leave them there. The engine idled quietly. The car was an older sedan, maybe from the early 2000s. Its paint looked dull under the overhead lights, like it hadn't been washed in years. The driver's window was already rolled down, but I couldn't see the driver clearly. Something about the interior lighting made their face disappear into shadow. A hand extended out of the window. Long fingers, pale. They held out a folded bill. I hesitated before stepping toward the window. When I took the bill, their fingers brushed mine. They were cold. Not just cool from the night air, cold in a way that felt wrong. The driver didn't speak, didn't move, didn't even seem to breathe. I placed the bill in the register and stepped back. "Have a good night," I said automatically. The car remained still for another 10 seconds. Then it rolled forward slowly and disappeared into the darkness beyond the toll plaza. I remember thinking the whole thing felt strange, but strange things happen on night shifts. You see tired people, lost tourists, truckers who've been driving too long. I shrugged it off. The next night was when the rules started making sense. It was almost exactly 3 in the morning when the first truck arrived. I saw the headlights long before I heard the engine. They crept down the highway at a steady pace, bright beams cutting through the darkness like searchlights. When the truck reached the plaza, it slowed and stopped directly beside my booth. The driver leaned toward the window. He wore a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. "Evening," he said. His voice sounded rough, like gravel grinding together. "Evening," I replied. He handed me a $20 bill. Then he asked the question. "Hey," he said casually, "how far to mile marker 211? My stomach tightened. Rule 5. I remembered Carl's exact wording. "Tell them the road is closed." "The road's closed past here tonight," I said. The driver didn't respond right away. He just stared at me from beneath the shadow of his hat. Then slowly he smiled. Not a normal smile. Too wide. Too many teeth. "That's so?" he said softly. I nodded. "Construction." The driver kept staring for a few seconds longer. Then he reached up and turned on the interior light of the truck. For the first time, I saw his face clearly. I wish I hadn't. His skin looked stretched tight across his skull. His eyes were pale gray, almost colorless. And when he blinked, something about the movement felt delayed, like the muscles in his face weren't quite synchronized. He leaned closer to the window. "So," he said quietly, "no mile marker 211 tonight?" "No," I said. He chuckled under his breath. Then he turned the light off again. "Good," he said. The truck pulled away slowly, engine rumbling as it disappeared down the road. I sat there for a long time after that. The highway went silent again,
The clock on the toll booth dashboard ticked closer to 3:13, and for the first time since starting the job, I found myself staring at the laminated rule sheet, because suddenly, I had the feeling those rules weren't written to protect the toll road, they were written to protect me. The first few weeks on the night shift had taught me that the toll plaza looked different when you were the only one awake to see it. During the day, the highway felt normal. Families and SUVs, delivery trucks rushing to make schedules, commuters tapping cards without even looking at the booth. But at night, especially after midnight, the road became something else entirely.
The headlights that appeared in the distance felt less like traffic and more like visitors, like things coming from somewhere that wasn't meant for people. By the start of my third week, I had memorized every rule Sam had written in that notebook. Rule number 1, never leave the booth between midnight and 4. Rule number 2, if a car pulls up without headlights, do not make eye contact. Rule number 3, if the driver asks for directions to mile marker 74, close the window and wait. Rule number 4, if a vehicle stops but no driver is visible, do not approach it. Rule number 5, if you see flashing lights in the woods, turn off the booth light and stay still. And the one rule that had been scribbled at the bottom of the page in shaky handwriting. Rule number 6, if the road goes quiet for too long, something is already here. At first, I had treated the list like a joke, something to make the job less boring. But the memory of that black sedan and the man with the unmoving smile had a way of creeping back into my thoughts whenever the highway fell silent. That night, the silence started earlier than usual. It was barely past 12:30 a.m. when the last car rolled through my lane, a silver pickup driven by a tired-looking guy hauling construction equipment. He paid the toll, gave me a nod, and drove off toward the darkness. Then the road went empty. Not just empty, still. Normally, there was always something in the distance, headlights cresting a hill, the faint rumble of engines miles away. But now, the highway stretched into blackness without a single moving light. I leaned forward in my chair and checked the clock. 12:47 a.m. Too early for the road to be this dead. A small chill crawled up the back of my neck, and before I could stop myself, I glanced down at Sam's notebook sitting beside the register. Rule number 6 stared back at me. If the road goes quiet for too long, something is already here. I swallowed and told myself not to be stupid. Highways went quiet sometimes. Accidents, detours, construction delays miles back. There were a dozen perfectly normal explanations. Still, the silence kept pressing in. Even the usual night sounds were gone. No wind, no insects, just the dull hum of the fluorescent light inside the booth. I reached over and turned the small radio on, hoping some music would break the tension. Static crackled through the speaker for a moment before a faint country station came through. The sound helped for about 10 minutes. Then the radio died. Not faded, not lost signal. It cut out mid-song with a sharp pop, leaving the booth in silence again. And that was when I saw the headlights. They appeared suddenly in the distance, just over the rise in the road, 2 bright points floating in the darkness. Relief washed through me at first. Finally, a car. But as the vehicle got closer, something about the headlights felt wrong. They were too high off the ground and too far apart. My fingers slowly tightened around the edge of the counter as the shape of the vehicle began to emerge from the darkness. It wasn't a car. It was a truck, a massive semi-truck. The cab was tall and narrow, with a long trailer stretching behind it like a black wall. The headlights glared straight into the booth as it rolled closer, bright enough to make me squint. But the strange part wasn't the truck itself, it was the speed. The thing was barely moving. It crawled toward the toll booth at a pace so slow it almost looked like it was gliding. By the time it reached the payment line, nearly 3 full minutes had passed. The truck stopped. The engine didn't idle. There was no rumbling diesel sound, just silence.
My heart started beating faster. Slowly, I leaned toward the window. "Evening," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. No response. The truck's windshield was dark, completely black, like the inside of the cab had swallowed all the light. I leaned a little closer. "Sir?" Still nothing. Then the driver's side window rolled down. The motion was so smooth it almost didn't make a sound, and when it opened, I immediately wished it hadn't, because the driver sitting inside the cab wasn't looking at me. He was looking straight ahead, perfectly still. At first glance, he looked normal, a thin man wearing a faded trucker cap pulled low over his eyes. His skin looked pale under the toll plaza lights, and his hands rested loosely on the steering wheel. But something about the way he was sitting felt unnatural. He wasn't breathing. At least I couldn't see his chest moving. Toll is $6, I said. The man didn't react. Seconds passed. Then, slowly, his head began to turn. Not smoothly, not naturally. It moved in small, jerking motions, like something pulling it sideways, until his face was pointed directly at the booth window. The brim of his hat lifted just enough for me to see his eyes. They were completely black. Not dark brown, not shadowed. Black. The kind of black that looked like empty space. My stomach dropped. And then the driver smiled. Not wide, like the man in the black sedan. This smile was smaller, tighter, but it stretched just a little too far across his face. "You work here," he said quietly. His voice sounded hollow, like it was echoing from somewhere deep inside his throat. Yeah, I said. The man nodded once. Then he spoke again. "Good." He reached into the cab beside him and slowly placed something on the edge of the toll window. It wasn't money. It was a photograph. I hesitated before picking it up. The picture showed a stretch of highway at night, an empty road, and a toll booth. My toll booth. But the booth in the photo looked different. The lights were off. The windows were black. And standing in the middle of the road directly in front of it was me, or something that looked like me. The figure in the picture was facing the camera, standing motionless under the highway lights. But the face was wrong. The mouth was open far wider than it should have been. And the eyes were black. I felt my hands start to shake. What is this?" I whispered. The truck driver leaned closer to the window, close enough that I could smell something rotten drifting out of the cab. "A preview," he said. A cold knot formed in my chest. "Preview of what?" The driver's smile widened slowly. "Where you will be standing soon." I dropped the photograph like it had burned me. "No," I said quickly. "No, I'm not." "Everyone who works here stands there eventually," the driver continued calmly. His black eyes never blinked. "You just haven't stayed long enough yet." My mind raced. Sam's notebook flashed through my thoughts again. The rules, the warnings, but there was no rule about trucks, no rule about photographs. "What do you want?" I asked. The driver tilted his head slightly. "I'm only passing through." His voice sounded almost polite. "But I wanted to see if you were ready." "Ready for what?" The driver's smile widened slowly. "For when the road decides to keep you." My pulse pounded in my ears. "Look, just pay the toll and move on." For a moment, the driver didn't move. Then he slowly reached into his pocket and placed 6 crumpled dollar bills on the window ledge. "Of course," he said. I grabbed the money quickly and hit the button to raise the barrier arm. The truck didn't move right away. Instead, the driver leaned forward one last time. "You should read the rest of the rules,"
he whispered. "There are more than 6. Then the window rolled up. A second later, the semi-truck began to move again. Slowly, silently, it rolled through the toll lane and disappeared into the darkness beyond the plaza. I sat frozen in my chair long after the taillights vanished. My hands were shaking, my chest felt tight, and one thought kept echoing in my mind. There are more than 6 rules. After a few seconds, I grabbed Sam's notebook and flipped through the pages again. At first, I thought the driver was lying. The notebook only had 6 rules written in it. But when I turned to the very last page, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A piece of paper had been folded and tucked into the back cover. Slowly, I pulled it out. My hands were trembling as I unfolded it, and the moment I read the first line, the blood drained from my face. Because it wasn't written by Sam, it was written by someone else. The handwriting was different, messier, like it had been scribbled in a hurry. And at the top of the page were 3 words: additional rules. The first one read, "Rule number 7. If a truck without an engine sound passes your booth, do not check the cameras afterward." My eyes slowly moved to the next line. Rule number 8. If you ever see yourself standing on the road outside, do not leave the booth to help. My throat tightened, and then I read the last rule on the page. Rule number 9. If the driver asks if you are ready, it means the road has already chosen you. Outside the booth, the highway was still empty, but far down the road, I thought I saw headlights again. And for the first time since taking this job, I started to wonder if Sam had ever actually quit. For a long time after the truck disappeared into the darkness, I just sat there staring at the paper in my hands. Rule number 7. Rule number 8. Rule number 9. The handwriting was rough and uneven, like whoever wrote it hadn't had much time, or maybe their hands had been shaking. I read the lines again and again, hoping they'd somehow change. They didn't. The worst one was the last rule. If the driver asks if you are ready, it means the road has already chosen you. The truck driver's voice echoed in my mind. You just haven't stayed long enough yet. My chest tightened. I slowly looked up from the paper and out through the glass of the booth. The highway stretched away into darkness on both sides of the toll plaza. The fluorescent lights overhead cast pale circles across the empty lanes, making the road look almost bleached and lifeless. For a moment, everything looked normal again. No headlights, no trucks, just an empty highway. I folded the paper carefully and slid it back into the notebook. My fingers felt stiff and cold. Then I checked the clock. 1:38 a.m., still hours left in the shift. I leaned back in the chair and rubbed my face with both hands, trying to steady myself. Maybe Sam had written those extra rules after he left the notebook behind. Maybe he'd been messing with me the whole time. But something about the handwriting told me that wasn't true. And then there was the photograph, the image of me standing in the middle of the highway. That hadn't been a joke. My eyes drifted toward the security monitor mounted above the booth window. The small screen showed feeds from 4 cameras around the toll plaza, 2 facing the incoming lanes and 2 aimed toward the road behind me. For a moment, I considered checking the footage,
seeing if the truck had actually appeared on camera. Then my gaze dropped back to the notebook. Rule number 7. If a truck without an engine sound passes your booth, do not check the cameras afterward. I swallowed and looked away from the monitor. Nope, not doing that. The silence returned again after that, but this time it felt heavier, like the air itself had thickened around the booth. Minutes crawled by slowly. Then, around 2:05 a.m., the headlights appeared again. At first, I thought it was just another car cresting the hill, but as the lights drew closer, I noticed something strange. They weren't moving toward the booth. They were already here. My stomach tightened. The headlights were coming from the other side of the toll plaza, from the road behind me. I turned slowly in my chair and looked at the rear camera monitor. a car was sitting directly behind the booth, right in the middle of the empty highway lane. Its headlights were shining straight at the back wall. I frowned. That didn't make any sense. Cars weren't supposed to approach from that direction. The lanes behind the toll booth only led to the exit ramps miles down the road. No one should be coming from that side. Yet the car was there, and it wasn't moving. I stared at the screen for several seconds, trying to make out the shape of the vehicle through the glare of its headlights. It looked small, maybe a sedan? Then the driver's door opened. A figure stepped out onto the road. Even through the grainy camera feed, I could see the person clearly. A man. He walked slowly around the front of the car and stopped directly in front of the headlights, turning toward me. Toward me. Even though he was standing far away on the camera feed, something about the way he was looking in my direction made my skin crawl. He raised one hand and waved. I blinked in confusion. Then I remembered rule number 8. If you ever see yourself standing on the road outside, do not leave the booth to help. A cold chill ran down my spine. Slowly, carefully, I leaned forward toward the monitor. The man outside the car was still waving, but now that I was looking closer, I noticed something that made my breath catch in my throat. The man's clothes looked familiar. Dark hoodie, faded jeans, work boots. The exact same clothes I was wearing. My pulse started pounding in my ears. "No," I whispered under my breath. The figure on the screen took a few slow steps toward the booth. Then he stopped again, and the moment he tilted his head up toward the camera, I saw his face. It was mine. Every detail was the same. Same haircut, same stubble along the jaw, same tired expression, except for the eyes. They were black, completely black. The thing wearing my face smiled slowly. Then it raised both hands and began motioning for me to come outside. My entire body went cold. I shoved the chair back from the counter and stood up quickly, nearly knocking the notebook onto the floor. Nope, not happening. The thing outside continued waving. When I didn't respond, its smile slowly began to fade. The expression on its face twisted into something impatient. Then it pointed directly at the booth door. Tap, tap, tap. It was mimicking the motion of knocking, as if it expected me to come outside. My gaze darted back to the notebook again.
"I'm not helping," I said quietly. The thing outside lowered its hands. For several long seconds, it just stood there, staring at the booth. Then its head slowly tilted to one side, and the smile came back. But this time, it looked wrong. Too wide, too stretched. Almost identical to the smile from the black sedan driver earlier that night. My stomach dropped. The creature slowly turned around and walked back toward the car. For a moment, I felt a wave of relief. Maybe it was leaving. But when it reached the vehicle, it didn't get inside. Instead, it climbed up onto the hood, then onto the roof, and stood there, perfectly still, staring directly at the toll booth, at me. The headlights behind it cast a long shadow across the road, stretching toward the booth like dark fingers. I backed away from the monitor. "Okay," I whispered, "just ignore it." But deep down, I knew something worse was coming, because the road was still silent. And according to the rules, that meant something was already here. Another 10 minutes passed. The creature on the roof of the car didn't move. It just stood there watching. Then, suddenly, the silence broke. Far down the highway in front of the toll plaza, a new pair of headlights appeared. A car approaching from the correct direction this time. Relief surged through me. Finally, a normal driver. The headlights grew brighter as the car came closer, and I quickly sat back down in the booth chair, trying to act like everything was normal. The vehicle rolled toward the booth at a steady speed. It was an older station wagon, rust along the doors, roof rack on top, totally ordinary. As the car pulled up to the toll window, the driver rolled the glass down. A middle-aged woman sat behind the wheel. She looked tired, but otherwise completely normal. "Evening?" she said. Her voice sounded calm, human. I felt my shoulders relax slightly. "Evening," I replied. $6, right? "Yeah." She handed me the money. But before I could take it, she leaned a little closer and spoke again. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." She nodded toward the highway behind the booth. "Why is there a man standing on top of my car?" Every muscle in my body locked up. Slowly, I turned my head toward the security monitor. The creature wearing my face was still standing on the roof of the car behind the booth, except now it wasn't smiling anymore. It was staring directly at the woman in the station wagon, and its mouth was slowly opening wider and wider. For a second, I couldn't speak. My eyes were locked on the monitor, watching the thing that looked like me standing on top of the car behind the booth. Its mouth kept opening wider, stretching past anything a human face be able to do. The woman at the window followed my gaze. "Is something wrong?" she asked. I forced myself to look back at her. "Ma'am," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice steady, "when you drove up, did you see anyone behind you on the road?" She frowned. "No, the highway was empty for miles." My stomach dropped. Of course it was, because the thing behind the booth hadn't come from the road. It had come from here. The woman shifted in her seat and glanced toward the rearview mirror. "I swear I didn't feel anyone climb onto the car," she said nervously. "Don't look back," I said quickly. She froze. "Why?" "Just don't." Behind me, the security monitor flickered slightly. I didn't want to look again, but I couldn't stop myself. When my eyes returned to the screen, the creature had moved. It was no longer standing upright. Now it was crouched on the roof of the car, limbs bent at sharp angles, fingers gripping the metal like claws.
And it was staring directly at the woman in front of me. Its black eyes were wide, hungry. The smile slowly began creeping back across its face. "Ma'am, I need you to listen carefully." Her grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Okay? When I lift the barrier, you need to drive. Don't stop, don't slow down, just keep going." "Why?" "Because something wearing my face was about to crawl off her car." But I didn't say that. "Just trust me." The woman hesitated. Then she nodded. "All right." My hand moved to the control button beside the register. Behind me, I heard a faint sound through the booth wall. A soft metallic creak, like weight shifting on top of a car. I slammed the barrier button. The arm lifted. "Go!" I said. The woman hit the gas immediately. The station wagon shot forward through the lane, tires screeching against the pavement as it sped down the highway. For a split second, I saw the monitor again. The creature was gone. Not on the roof anymore, not on the road, just gone. The car's taillights disappeared into the darkness, and the highway fell silent again. I sat there, breathing hard, staring at the empty monitor. Then, slowly, very slowly, I heard something behind me. A soft knock. Tap, 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 right on the back door of the booth. My blood ran cold, because the rules never said anything about what to do if it made it inside the toll plaza.